A fisherman just dove 30 meters underwater on a single breath. No tank, no fins, no equipment of any kind. He has been doing this since he was 7 years old. His body has physically adapted. His spleen contracts differently than yours or mine, releasing oxygen into his bloodstream in a way that allows him to stay under longer than almost any other human on Earth. He is not an athlete. He is not a record holder. He is just a man going to work. And the ocean he dives into every morning, an ocean so biodiverse that scientists have called it the center of marine life on Earth, is one of the least documented, least visited, least understood wilderness systems on the planet. This is the Philippines. And nobody has been telling you the right story about it. 7,641 islands. That number sounds like an exaggeration until you look at a map. And even then, it doesn't fully process, because the human brain is not designed to hold the idea of 7,000 islands simultaneously. It tries to reduce it, to simplify it, to make it manageable. But the Philippines resists simplification. In this video, I'm going to take you inside a wilderness so vast, so layered, so biologically extraordinary that the world's leading scientists are still discovering new species here every single year. From underground rivers that run through mountains for miles without ever seeing sunlight, to volcanoes that erupt so precisely and so regularly that local farmers use them as agricultural calendars, to coral reef systems so dense with life that dropping below the surface feels less like diving and more like entering a different dimension. But I need to tell you 3 things I found in the Philippines that permanently changed how I understand the natural world. A forest so ancient it contains trees that were already old when the first European ships arrived. A lake inside a volcano, inside an island, inside a lake, a geological recursion so improbable it should not be possible. And a river that runs underground for 8.5 kilometers through the interior of a mountain, emerging at the sea. And along the way passes through cathedral chambers so large that entire fleets of boats can navigate them in the dark. 3 impossibilities, 7,000 islands. Let's begin. The archipelago at the center of everything. Before we go anywhere, I need to give you a number. 37%. That is the proportion of the world's known coral species found in Philippine waters. Not 37% of Asia's coral, 37% of the entire planet's known coral species in the waters surrounding one archipelago. Marine biologists have a term for what exists in this part of the world: the coral triangle. A roughly triangular region of the western Pacific Ocean, with the Philippines at its apex, that contains more marine species per unit area than anywhere else on Earth. More species of fish, more species of coral, more species of marine invertebrates, more species of everything that lives in salt water. The Coral Triangle is to ocean biodiversity what the Amazon is to terrestrial biodiversity. It is the engine room, the library, the place where the ocean keeps its deepest knowledge. And at the top of that triangle, at the point of highest concentration, sits the Philippines. Scientists call this the center of marine biodiversity on Earth. The place where, if you had to save one piece of ocean to preserve the maximum amount of biological information, this is where you would go. Most people think of the Philippines as a beach destination. They have not yet understood what the water actually contains. The river inside the mountain. We begin underground. On the island of Palawan, itself one of the most biologically diverse islands on Earth, there is a mountain called St. Paul. And inside that mountain, moving through limestone caverns carved over millions of years by the slow insistence of water against rock, flows the Puerto Princesa subterranean river. 8.5 kilometers of navigable underground river, the longest in the world. To enter it, you board a small boat at the river's mouth, a cave opening at sea level where the river emerges from the mountain and meets the South China Sea. And then you go into the dark, into the mountain, into a silence so complete that the sound of your own breathing becomes loud. The chambers inside are vast. The largest, called the Italian's Chamber, is roughly 360 meters long and 150 meters wide, a space large enough to contain several football fields. The ceiling rises 60 meters above the water. Stalactites hang from it in formations that took millions of years to build, each one growing at a rate of approximately 1 centimeter per century. Light penetrates only a few meters into the cave. Beyond that, the only illumination comes from the lamps on the boats, and what they reveal as you move deeper is a world of geological time made visible. Rock formations shaped by water and mineral deposit over spans so long they approach meaninglessness to the human mind. 100,000 years, 1 million years, 10 million years. The stone does not distinguish, it simply continues. The river emerges from the mountain at sea level because the mountain itself is essentially hollow. A vast limestone karst system riddled with chambers and passages and underground waterways, all of them products of millions of years of rainfall dissolving calcium carbonate from the rock. In 2012, the Puerto Princesa Subterranean River was voted one of the new 7 wonders of nature. For the local Palawan communities, it has been sacred for far longer than that. The Impossible Lake. Quick pause. I recently started this channel to take you to the world's most extraordinary and hidden places. We're still at the very beginning, so every subscriber really matters. If this kind of content helps you understand the world better, consider subscribing. It helps me keep exploring and bring you even more breathtaking destinations and make even better videos. Thanks. Now let's keep traveling together. Now, that geological recursion I mentioned. The lake inside a volcano, inside an island, inside a lake. Let me take you to Taal. In the province of Batangas, south of Manila, there is a large body of water called Taal Lake. It covers approximately 234 square kilometers, a significant inland sea by any measure. And rising from the center of that lake is an island, Volcano Island, the above-water portion of one of the most active volcanoes in the Philippines. And at the summit of Volcano Island, inside the caldera of the volcano, there is a lake, Crater Lake, a body of water sitting inside a volcano, sitting inside an island, sitting inside a larger lake. A geological structure so layered and self-referential that it appears in textbooks as one of the most unusual landforms on Earth. But Taal is not simply a curiosity of geography. It is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the world. Despite its relatively modest height, the summit of Volcano Island sits only about 311 meters above Taal Lake. Taal has killed more people than almost any other volcano in Philippine history. Its eruptions are explosive and unpredictable. The 1911 eruption killed over 1,300 people in minutes. In January 2020, it erupted again, sending an ash column 15 kilometers into the sky, covering surrounding towns in volcanic debris and forcing hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate. And yet, people return. They always return, because the soil around Taal is among the most fertile in the Philippines. The same volcanic activity that makes the land dangerous makes it extraordinarily productive. Farmers have understood this equation for centuries, the risk and the reward existing in permanent, uneasy balance. From the shore of Taal Lake, on a clear morning, the view of Volcano Island rising from the water with a thin plume of steam at its summit is one of the most quietly menacing, beautiful things you will ever see. The forest that predates everything. From the volcanic landscapes of Batangas, the journey moves to a different kind of ancient. On the island of Palawan, which I am increasingly convinced is one of the most extraordinary places on Earth. There exists a forest that scientists have designated as one of the most intact and biodiverse in all of Southeast Asia. The forests of northern Palawan, extending through the El Nido area and into the Malampaya sound-protected landscape and seascape, contain trees that were already mature when Ferdinand Magellan's fleet arrived in the Philippines in 1521. Old-growth dipterocarp forest, the dominant forest type of Southeast Asia, characterized by enormous emergent trees whose canopies rise 40, 50, sometimes 60 meters above the forest floor. Walking into old-growth dipterocarp forest is a physical experience before it is a visual one. The light changes immediately, the temperature drops, the humidity rises, the sound of the outside world, wind, birds, the crash of surf if you have been near the coast, is absorbed by the vegetation within the first 100 meters. And then, as your eyes adjust, the scale becomes apparent. Trees with trunk diameters of 2, 3, sometimes 4 meters. Root systems that spread along the forest floor in buttresses taller than a person. Flat vertical walls of wood that anchor the tree against wind and provide stability in the shallow tropical soil. Canopies so dense that direct sunlight reaches the forest floor only in scattered patches, each one hosting a competition between dozens of plant species racing to capture the light before it disappears. Palawan's forests have been designated part of the Philippines' last frontier, a term used by conservationists to describe the remaining areas of the country where the original ecosystem is still largely intact. The rest of the Philippine archipelago has lost the majority of its original forest cover to agriculture, logging, and development. Palawan has retained more than almost anywhere else, but that frontier is shrinking. Every year, a little more of what remains becomes something else. The sea that breathes. At 30% of this journey, I need to tell you something that reframes everything we have looked at so far. The Philippines sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. This means that the archipelago is the product of millions of years of tectonic violence, of oceanic plates diving beneath continental plates, of volcanic eruptions building islands from the seafloor, of earthquakes reshaping coastlines in minutes. This geological history is the reason the Philippines is what it is. The dramatic limestone karst formations, the volcanic lakes, the underground rivers, the islands themselves, every single one of them is either a volcano or a fragment of reef limestone lifted by tectonic force from beneath the sea. And the same forces that created the land created the underwater world surrounding it. The Philippine Sea contains the deepest point on Earth. The Philippine Trench, also called the Mindanao Deep, plunges to a depth of approximately 10,540 meters. To put that in context, if you placed Mount Everest at the bottom of the Philippine Trench, its summit would still be more than 1,600 meters below the surface. This extremity of depth, from the deepest ocean trench on Earth to the coral-rich shallow reefs at the surface, creates a vertical range of habitats found nowhere else on the planet. Species that exist at crushing pressure and total darkness in the trench. Species that live in the warm, light-flooded shallows of the coral reefs. And an entire spectrum of ecological communities between those two extremes. The Philippines is not simply biodiverse, it is vertically biodiverse, across a range of depth and habitat that encompasses conditions from one extreme of what life can tolerate to almost the opposite extreme. The chocolate hills and the island that shouldn't exist. Quick pause. I recently started this channel to take you to the world's most extraordinary and hidden places. We're still at the very beginning, so every subscriber really matters. If this kind of content helps you understand the world better, consider subscribing. It helps me keep exploring and bring you even more breathtaking destinations and make even better videos. Thanks. Now let's keep traveling together. On the island of Bohol, in the central Philippines, there are more than 1,200 hills. They are almost perfectly conical. They range in height from 30 to 120 meters. They are covered in grass that turns brown in the dry season, giving them the color and, from a distance, roughly the appearance of chocolate. The Chocolate Hills of Bohol are a geological formation so unusual that they appear in Philippine law. The country's National Cultural Treasures Act designated them as a National Geological Monument. They appear on the provincial flag of Bohol, and despite decades of scientific study, there is no complete consensus on exactly how they formed. The leading hypothesis involves the uplift of marine limestone that was then shaped by rainfall into its current conical forms, a process called karst topography, similar to what creates the limestone pillars of Zhangjiajie in China or the karst formations of Ha Long Bay in Vietnam. But the precision and regularity of the Chocolate Hills, 1,200 hills of remarkably similar shape and size, spread across an area of approximately 50 square kilometers, is difficult to explain through natural processes alone. Local legend provides a simpler answer. Two giants fought here, throwing boulders at each other across the landscape for days until they exhausted themselves and made peace. The boulders they threw became the hills. I prefer the geological explanation. But standing on the viewing platform at Carmen, looking out across a landscape of perfectly rounded brown mounds extending to every horizon, the legend does not feel entirely unreasonable. The last nomads of the sea. Now I need to tell you about the fishermen I mentioned at the beginning. The Bajau people. Spread across the waters of the southern Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, the Bajau have lived on and above the sea for centuries, some communities for more than 1,000 years. They are called Sea Nomads. Historically, many Bajau communities never lived on land at all. Their entire lives conducted on wooden boats, moving with the seasons and the fish. Today, many Bajau communities live in stilt villages built above shallow coastal waters. Wooden houses on poles driven into the seabed, connected by narrow walkways, with boats moored at every doorway. But it is what happens beneath the surface that makes the Bajau scientifically extraordinary. In 2018, a study published in the journal Cell reported something that had long been observed but never genetically confirmed. Bajau divers have spleens that are approximately 50% larger than those of neighboring non-diving populations. The spleen acts as a reservoir of oxygenated red blood cells. When a person dives, the spleen contracts and releases those cells into the bloodstream, extending the time before oxygen deprivation becomes critical. The Bajau spleen enlargement is genetic. It is an evolutionary adaptation, a biological change that accumulated over generations of selection pressure from a life spent diving. The Bajau have been diving so intensively for so many generations that natural selection has physically reshaped their internal organs to make them better at it. This is human evolution happening on a timescale we can trace, not 10,000 years of gradual change. A few hundred to a few thousand years of intensive selection producing a measurable, documented genetic difference in organ size. The Bajau are not just the world's most accomplished breath-hold divers. They are living evidence that human evolution did not stop when civilization began. The volcano that farmers trust. On the island of Leyte, in the eastern Visayas, there is a volcano called Canlaon. On the island of Luzon, there is Mayon. On Mindanao, there is Apo, the highest peak in the Philippines at 2,954 meters. But I want to talk about Mayon. Mayon volcano is considered the most perfectly formed stratovolcano on Earth. Its cone, rising 2,463 meters from the Bicol Plain, achieves a symmetry that approaches the theoretical ideal. The slope angle averages approximately 35 degrees from base to summit, maintaining that consistency almost all the way around. From any direction, from any distance, Mayon looks like a drawing of what a volcano is supposed to look like. It has erupted more than 50 times in recorded history. It is one of the most active volcanoes in the Philippines. Eruptions have killed hundreds of people across its history. The most deadly, in 1814, buried the town of Cagsawa under volcanic debris, and the ruins of its church tower still emerge from the ground at the base of the volcano, a permanent monument to the power of what rises above it. And around that volcano, on its lower slopes, in the valleys between its flanks and the sea, people farm intensively. The volcanic soil around Mayon is among the richest in the Philippines. Abaca, rice, vegetables. The same eruptions that have repeatedly destroyed communities have repeatedly restored the fertility of the land those communities depend on. Every farmer who plants within sight of Mayon is making a calculation, a long-term bet on productivity against risk. A wager that has been made here for centuries and will continue to be made because the land demands it and the volcano, for now, permits it. The rice terraces that are older than Rome. Quick pause. I recently started this channel to take you to the world's most extraordinary and hidden places. We're still at the very beginning, so every subscriber really matters. If this kind of content helps you understand the world better, consider subscribing. It helps me keep exploring and bring you even more breathtaking destinations and make even better videos. Thanks. Now, let's keep traveling together. In the Cordillera Mountains of northern Luzon, at elevations between 700 and 1,500 meters above sea level, there are rice terraces. Not a few terraces, not a tourist attraction built within the last few centuries to impress visitors. The Ifugao rice terraces cover approximately 10,360 hectares of steep mountain slope. They extend up some mountainsides for the entire height of the mountain, from valley floor to summit, in steps so continuous and so precisely engineered that from above they look like the contour lines of a topographic map brought to 3 dimensions. They are estimated to be between 2,000 and 3,000 years old. Older than the Colosseum, older than the fall of Rome, older than the construction of most of Europe's great cathedrals. Built by the Ifugao people using only hand tools and a knowledge of hydrology, soil mechanics, and terrain management that was developed entirely independently, without outside instruction, without written plans, without engineering degrees. The irrigation system that feeds these terraces is equally remarkable. Water is collected in the forest at the mountain's summit and channeled downward through a network of aqueducts, bamboo pipes, stone channels, earthen ditches that distributes it from the highest terrace to the lowest in a gravity-fed system that has functioned continuously for 2,000 years. UNESCO inscribed the Ifugao rice terraces as a World Heritage Site in 1995, calling them a living cultural landscape. The designation was specific and deliberate because the terraces are not a monument or a ruin. They are a functioning agricultural system. Ifugao farmers still plant and harvest rice in them every year, using the same varieties and many of the same techniques their ancestors used 2 millennia ago. But the terraces face a crisis. Young Ifugao people are leaving for cities. The agricultural knowledge required to maintain the terraces, the intricate understanding of water management, soil health, and terrace wall repair that took generations to accumulate is not being passed on at the rate it needs to be. UNESCO placed the terraces on its list of World Heritage in danger in 2001. The stone walls that have held these mountainsides in place for 3,000 years require constant maintenance. Without the people who know how to maintain them, the terraces will begin to collapse. And once a terrace system of this age and complexity begins to fail, reconstruction is not simply a matter of rebuilding walls. It requires rebuilding the knowledge, and knowledge, once lost, does not rebuild easily. The forest underwater. Between the islands of Leyte and Bohol, in the body of water called the Bohol Sea, there is a dive site called Balicasag Island. I am going to describe what it looks like to dive there, and I want you to hold the image. You enter the water at the surface, warm, clear, visibility extending perhaps 30 meters in every direction. Below you, the reef begins immediately. A plateau of coral perhaps 15 meters deep extending outward from the island in every direction. The coral density is extraordinary, not patches or clusters, but a continuous carpet of reef structure with almost no bare rock visible beneath it. Then the plateau ends, and the wall begins, a vertical drop from 15 meters to beyond recreational diving depth, past 40 meters, past 60, continuing downward into the blue-black depths of the Bohol Sea. The wall is covered from top to bottom in coral, in sea fans the size of small trees, in sponges of every geometric configuration, and moving through all of it, clouds of fish so dense that in places they block the light, schools of jacks moving in synchronized formations of hundreds of individuals. Napoleon rasa, among the largest reef fish in the world, reaching 1.8 meters in length, moving slowly and apparently without concern past divers who hold their breath at the size of them. The Philippines has more documented fish species than almost any other nation on Earth, more than 2,500 species of marine fish. And in places like Balicasag, you can encounter in a single dive a representative sample of that diversity so extensive that marine biologists spend years attempting to catalog it. But here is what matters beyond the numbers. The reef at Balicasag is alive. It is not a degraded system showing recovery. It is not a protected area that used to be something extraordinary. It is currently extraordinary, right now, today. The kind of intact, dense, complex reef ecosystem that marine biologists increasingly struggle to find anywhere in the world. And it is here, in the Philippines, largely unvisited, largely undiscussed, waiting. The birds that build their own island. On the island of Palawan, in the protected waters of Tubbataha Reef, a UNESCO World Heritage Site accessible only by live-aboard boat, 2 days from the nearest port, there is an atoll. And on that atoll, something happens every year that I want you to picture. Seabirds arrive, thousands of them, frigate birds with wingspans approaching 2 meters, boobies in dense nesting colonies, terns in numbers that darken the sky above the atoll for moments at a time. They arrive because Tubbataha is one of the last places in this part of the Pacific where seabird colonies of this size still exist undisturbed. The reef system beneath the atoll is equally extraordinary. Tubbataha covers nearly 100,000 hectares of open ocean reef, a raised platform of coral rising from deep water, far enough from land to have escaped the fishing pressure that has degraded most Philippine reefs closer to inhabited islands. Shark populations here: white-tip reef sharks, black-tip reef sharks, gray reef sharks, hammerheads, exist at densities that were once common throughout the Philippine archipelago and are now rare almost everywhere else. Manta rays feed in the nutrient-rich waters along the reef edge. Whale sharks, the largest fish on Earth, reaching lengths of 12 meters, pass through seasonally, feeding on the plankton blooms that the open ocean generates. Tubbataha is not simply a beautiful place, it is a reference point, a baseline, what Philippine waters looked like before intensive fishing, before coral bleaching, before decades of human pressure on reef systems reduced what was once universal to what is now exceptional. Scientists use Tubbataha as a control. a comparison against which the state of degraded reefs elsewhere can be measured. It is what the Philippines used to be, and in some deeply important sense, what it still is, in the places where the wilderness has been allowed to persist. The mountain, where clouds are born. Quick pause. I recently started this channel to take you to the world's most extraordinary and hidden places. We're still at the very beginning, so every subscriber really matters. If this kind of content helps you understand the world better, consider subscribing. It helps me keep exploring and bring you even more breathtaking destinations and make even better videos. Thanks. Now let's keep traveling together. Mount Apo stands 2,954 meters above the island of Mindanao. It is the highest peak in the Philippines, and unlike many of the country's active volcanoes, Apo is dormant. The geological violence that created it has quieted, and what remains is a mountain of extraordinary ecological complexity. The slopes of Mount Apo pass through 4 distinct vegetation zones as you ascend: lowland dipterocarp forest, montane forest, mossy forest, and near the summit, a zone of stunted, wind-twisted trees and open grassland that exists above the cloud layer. The mossy forest zone, typically found between 1,500 and 2,500 meters, is the one that stops people. Every surface is covered: the trees, the ground, the rocks, the fallen logs. Even in places, the air itself seems saturated, a permanent mist that provides the moisture that allows the moss to persist. The sound is muffled. The light is diffuse, green, soft. Walking through mossy forest feels less like moving through a place and more like moving through a substance. The vegetation so dense and continuous that the distinction between tree and ground and air becomes unclear. Mount Apo is a sanctuary for the Philippine eagle, the national bird of the Philippines, one of the largest and most powerful eagles on Earth. With a wingspan approaching 2 meters and a hunting territory that can cover up to 100 square kilometers, the Philippine eagle is critically endangered. Fewer than 800 individuals are estimated to remain in the wild, almost all of them on Mindanao. Loss of forest habitat. The conversion of lowland dipterocarp forest to agriculture has eliminated most of the habitat these birds require. Mount Apo is one of the last places where they can still be found. Standing in the mossy forest of Apo's middle slopes, in the silence and the mist, listening for the call of a bird that may number fewer than 800 individuals on the entire planet, it is one of those moments where the word conservation stops being abstract and becomes personal, immediate, urgent in a way that statistics alone cannot produce. The island that gave the world its most important dive site. In 1967, a group of divers explored a submerged seamount in the Sulu Sea near the island of Tubbataha and reported what they found to the scientific community. What they found was eventually confirmed to be the highest density of marine life ever recorded in a single location. The site is now known as the Verde Island Passage, a narrow strait between Luzon and Mindoro that has been called the center of marine biodiversity on Earth by Dr. Kent Carpenter of Old Dominion University, who has spent decades documenting its contents. The numbers are difficult to hold. More than 1,700 species of fish, more than 700 species of coral, more than 1,000 species of reef-associated invertebrates, all in a passage roughly 8 kilometers wide and 50 kilometers long. The Verde Island Passage achieves this density because of its geography. The narrow strait creates powerful tidal currents that bring nutrient-rich deep water to the surface, feeding the plankton that feeds the reef that feeds everything else. The current also acts as a conduit for larval dispersal, connecting reef communities across the passage and maintaining genetic diversity across the entire system. Scientists who have dived here describe the experience in terms that their training makes them reluctant to use. Overwhelming, incomprehensible, one of the most extraordinary places on Earth, not metaphors. Attempts to describe a density of life that exceeds what scientific language was designed to process. And almost nobody outside of marine biology knows it exists. The return. 7,641 islands. After everything we have seen in this journey, the underground river and the impossible lake, the Sea Nomads with adapted spleens, the 2,000-year-old rice terraces, the deepest ocean trench on Earth, the last intact reef systems, the mossy forests, and the critically endangered eagles, that number still does not feel adequate. Because the Philippines is not 7,000 islands, it is 7,000 separate stories, 7,000 separate ecosystems, 7,000 separate negotiations between human communities and the wilderness that surrounds them. Negotiations that have been ongoing for thousands of years and that continue today with increasing urgency as the wilderness faces pressures that the people who built the Ifugao terraces and the Bajau stilt villages could not have anticipated. What this country contains, in its waters, in its forests, in its mountains, in its geological extremity, is among the most extraordinary accumulations of natural diversity on Earth, and it is largely unknown, largely undiscussed, largely absent from the conversations about global conservation that determine which places receive attention and resources and protection. The Philippines deserves better than that. Its wilderness deserves better than that. But here is what I have not shown you yet. There are communities in this archipelago, indigenous peoples who have lived in specific landscapes for thousands of years, who hold knowledge about those ecosystems that no scientist has yet fully documented. Knowledge about which plants regulate water flow in the forest, which fish populations indicate reef health, which cloud formations predict typhoon trajectories 3 days before modern meteorology detects them. In the next video, we go to find those communities, and what they know will change how you understand what wilderness actually means. Tell me in the comments. Which place in this video made you want to book a flight immediately? Because every time I watch footage from Tubbataha, my answer is the same. And stay with us, because the next journey goes somewhere even fewer people have been. If you're enjoying this video, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, share it with someone who needs to see this. And if you're not subscribed yet, you know what to do.